Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel. So we had started with the central nervous system in our earlier videos. We were discussing about the spinal cord and the functions of the spinal cord, that is the various types of reflexes and the motor and the sensory tracts which we have discussed in the last video. Okay, so we'll take up the next part of the central nervous system, that is the brain. So central nervous system, which is comprising of the brain and the spinal cord. So we have discussed in detail about the spinal cord, the protective layers and the functions. So coming to the second part of the central nervous system, that is the brain. And of course we will be discussing about the cushioning liquid which is present within the CNS, between the different layers of the protective layers, as well as within the ventricles, which are the small cavities which are present within the brain. So we'll be discussing about the cerebrospinal fluid, that is CSF, which is known as very popularly. So we'll be discussing about how this CSF is produced, how it flows, and what are the different functions. Okay, to start with the brain, coming to the development of the brain. So we'll be just discussing in brief about how the development of the brain, adult brain, takes place. So we'll be just briefing on which parts are derived from the specific type of vesicles which are present in the embryo. Now this is a 3 to 4 week embryo brain. So as you can see that the brain, it is in the form of 3 vesicles. That is, there is a cavity surrounded by a wall, and there are 3 different vesicles which are located over here. So these particular parts of the brain in this 3 to 4 weeks embryo, these are the prosencephalon, that is the forebrain, which develops into the forebrain. Then mesencephalon, the middle vesicle, that is the midbrain, and the rhomboencephalon, that is the hindbrain. Encephalon is a term pertaining to the brain. So as you can see, as the embryo grows, that is a 5-week embryo if you consider, so the vesicles have now developed into 5 secondary vesicles. So these were the 3 primary brain vesicles which have now differentiated into 5 secondary brain vesicles. So as you can see, prosencephalon, it has developed into 2 different vesicles, right? That is telencephalon and diencephalon. Mesencephalon remains the same, and the rhomboencephalon has developed into 2 secondary brain vesicles, that is the metencephalon and myencephalon. Now these 5 secondary brain vesicles which are found in the 5-week embryo, they have a cavity within them and a wall which is surrounding that particular cavity, right? So that forms a vesicle. So these particular vesicles, they further develop into certain parts of the adult brain. So the wall of the vesicle, it will develop into a particular part, and the cavity which is present within it, that will also develop into a specific part in the adult brain. So as you can see over here, this is the list of the parts of adult brain which are derived from the wall of the vesicles, whereas these which are listed over here, these are the parts which have been developed from the cavities which are present within the different vesicles. Okay, now let us see what are those different parts into which the walls and the cavities of these vesicles develop into. So coming to the telencephalon, the wall of telencephalon, it differentiates into cerebrum, which is the largest part of the brain, and the cavity which is present within the telencephalon, it develops into lateral ventricles. The diencephalon, the wall of it differentiates into the thalamus, hypothalamus and the epithalamus. It is collectively known as diencephalon, these three parts. Whereas the cavity which is located within it, it differentiates or develops into third ventricle. Then the mesencephalon, the wall of the mesencephalon develops into the midbrain, whereas the cavity within it, it develops into aqueduct of the midbrain. We'll be discussing all these parts in this particular video in the coming slides. Just focus on which particular vesicle is developing into which parts in the adult brain. Okay. Then next vesicle is the metencephalon. So the wall of this metencephalon, it develops into pons and cerebellum, whereas the cavity, it develops into upper part of the fourth ventricle. Then the last vesicle, that is the myencephalon. The wall of it develops into medulla oblongata, whereas the cavity within it, it develops into the lower part of the fourth ventricle. Okay, so these are the different parts into which the various vesicles which are present, they get developed into in the adult brain. Okay, with this brief introduction to the development of the brain, let us talk about the major parts of the brain. Now the adult brain, it comprises of four major parts. That is the brain stem. This is the one. Brain stem. The cerebellum. That's the cerebellum. The diencephalon. Remember diencephalon, what it comprises of? Thalamus, hypothalamus and the epithalamus. So that's the thalamus. This is the hypothalamus. And this is a part of epithalamus, pineal gland. And the fourth part is the cerebrum. Okay, this one, the superior portion. So that's the cerebrum. Now, coming to the brain stem. Now, this brain stem, which forms the inferior part of the brain, it is in continuation with the spinal cord. That's your spinal cord. Remember, spinal cord, it extends from the medulla oblongata. That's what we had discussed, right? That's the medulla oblongata, which is a part of brain stem. So the inferior part of the brain stem is the medulla oblongata. The middle part is known as the pons, and the superior portion of the brain stem is called as the midbrain. So these are the three parts into which the brain stem is divided into. And posterior to the brain stem, that's your anterior surface of your brain. So posterior to the brain stem lies the cerebellum. Cerebellum means little brain. And superior to the brain stem lies the diencephalon. Di means through and encephalon means brain. Okay. So this is present within the brain. So this comprises of three parts: thalamus, hypothalamus and the epithalamus. And supported on the diencephalon and the brain stem is the cerebrum. The actual meaning of this word cerebrum is brain. So that's the largest part of the brain and the main part of the brain. Okay, so we'll be discussing about all these parts in detail in the upcoming videos. So now to talk about the protective coverings of the brain. Just like the spinal cord has its protective layers, remember the vertebral column, the vertebrae which are stacked one above the other. So they form a canal in between through which the spinal cord will pass. So that's the first protective layer made up of bones. And within that, surrounding the spinal cord lies the meninges. That is three protective layers usually made up of the connective tissue. Remember over there we had discussed that the meninges, based on what it is surrounding, it is known as spinal meninges and the cranial meninges. And we had also discussed that the same three layers are in continuation with the layers which are surrounding the brain. So the same three layers are also surrounding and protecting the brain. Okay, so these are the two types of protective layers present. That is the cranium, that's the bones of the skull which is protecting your brain. That's the one. As you can see, this is the skin, and beneath that lies the cranium. That's a parietal bone. You must have studied about the skull, right, in detail. So that's the cranium, which is providing the bony case within which lies the brain. Because it's a delicate organ, right? Brain and the spinal cord also. So it needs proper protection is what we have seen. So the skull, it will protect it from the external blows. So it doesn't get damaged. And additional protection is provided by these cranial meninges which surround and protect the brain. So these cranial meninges are in continuation with the spinal meninges and they have the same basic structure and the same names. The outermost layer, if you can recall, the outermost layer of the spinal meninges was also dura mater, right? Middle layer was arachnoid mater and the innermost layer, which was actually in contact with the spinal cord, that was pia mater. So the same three layers are also surrounding the brain: the dura mater, the arachnoid mater and the pia mater. However, there is a difference in this dura mater. The cranial dura mater, it has two layers. If you can see over here, there are two layers, right? So these two layers are known as periosteal layer, which is the external layer, periosteal, something which is in close contact with the bone. And the inner layer is known as the meningeal layer. Okay, so these two layers of dura mater, these are fused together in most of the areas, except at certain areas wherein they separate to enclose the venous sinuses, dural venous sinuses. Sinuses, remember the sinuses, it's a type of capillary, right? Endothelial lined venous channels which drains the venous blood. that is the deoxygenated blood is drained by these sinuses from the brain, and it is delivered into the internal jugular vein, which will convey it towards the heart. There is one more difference in that there is no epidural space around the brain. Remember the epidural space, that's the space in between the dura mater and the inner wall of the vertebra. But do you find such space over here outside the dura mater? No. It's totally fused with the cranium, right? So there is no space in between over here. So that's one more difference. Then there are blood vessels which enter the brain tissues, which pass along the brain surface. So there are blood vessels which are passing along the brain surface, and they penetrate inwards towards the brain, and they have a covering of the pia mater. Then apart from this, the dura mater, it also has certain extensions which separate the different parts of the brain. Okay, the three extensions of this dura mater. Dura mater is the one which is the outermost layer, right? But there are extensions at specific areas which separate different parts of the brain. These extensions are the flex cerebri. This is the one. Second one is the flex cerebelli. This is the one. And the third one is the tentorium cerebelli. That's the one. Tentorium cerebelli. Now coming to the first one, that is flex cerebri. Flex means sickle shape. So this particular extension, it separates the two hemispheres of the cerebrum. Cerebrum is divided into two hemispheres. So the layer of the dura mater, it extends inwards in between these two hemispheres to separate them. Second extension is the flex cerebelli. So that separates the two hemispheres of the cerebellum. So it will extend inwards and it will separate the two hemispheres of the cerebellum. And the third extension, that is tentorium cerebelli. So that separates the cerebrum from the cerebellum. This is the one. So that's your cerebrum and that's the cerebellum. So both of them are separated from each other by this tentorium cerebelli. So these are the three extensions of the dura mater. Then coming to the blood flow towards the brain and the blood-brain barrier. Now the blood supply to the brain is provided via internal carotid artery. That's the internal carotid artery, right internal carotid artery. And the vertebral artery. So that's also supplying the oxygenated blood to the brain. And the deoxygenated blood, it is drained via different dural venous sinuses. So the blood vessels which are present around the brain along the dura mater, so these are in the form of sinuses, wide endothelial lined blood vessels. So they drain into the internal jugular vein. That's the right internal jugular vein. And from here the blood will be returned back to the heart. Now the adult brain, it occupies round about 2% of the total body weight. Just 2% of the total body weight. But as far as the consumption of oxygen and glucose are concerned, They consume round about 20% of it, the total body supply, even if you are resting. That's because it carries out a lot of functions, and continuously the brain is working, processing some information, giving some output. So it needs a lot of oxygen and energy, which is provided in the form of glucose. So the ATP which is required by these neurons, it is synthesized by the neurons exclusively by utilizing the glucose through reactions which require oxygen. That's why the oxygen and the energy requirement of the brain is very high. And when the activity of these neurons and neuroglia increase in a particular region, immediately the blood flow to that area will increase. Now imagine if there is a brief slowing in the blood flow in a particular area. What will happen? It will result in disorientation or lack of consciousness. So the blood flowing towards your brain, if it is obstructed due to some reason, even for a brief period of time, say for example, if you are sitting for a long period of time and you stand up too quickly, you will feel disoriented. Your body equilibrium may get disturbed. Consciousness may get slightly altered. Okay, so even a brief interruption of the blood flow to the brain, even for 1 to 2 minutes, it may impair the neural functions. And deprivation of oxygen for about 4 minutes can permanently damage the neurons in the brain. That's because there are no stores of glucose present in the brain. It totally depends upon the glucose which is provided by the blood supply to the brain. Imagine if your blood glucose level goes down, what will happen? It will result in mental confusion, dizziness, convulsions, or even loss of consciousness. If the blood flow decreases or the blood glucose level decreases, these are the signs and symptoms which can be seen. Even in a diabetic patient, your blood glucose level you can easily monitor. If your blood glucose level drops below normal, these are the signs and symptoms which you will get. That means you need to check your blood glucose and your blood pressure. Then coming to the blood-brain barrier. Remember this particular picture? That belongs to the central nervous system, right? We had discussed about the neuroglia of the CNS. Oligodendrocytes, astrocytes, microglia and ependymal cells. So these are the different types of neuroglia which are present in the CNS. Now remember, we had discussed about the blood-brain barrier when we were discussing about the astrocytes, the functions of astrocytes. The blood capillaries which are present within the brain, they contain the tight junctions. The endothelial cells which are lining these blood capillaries, these are held together by tight junctions, so that any substance which is present in your blood capillary, it cannot cross them and reach your CNS. Usually the capillaries, they have wide spaces in between these endothelial cells, right? But that is not the case with the blood capillaries which are present in the CNS. the cranial blood vessels or cranial blood capillaries. Apart from these tight junctions, the processes of the neuroglia, that is astrocytes, which is one of the type of neuroglia, the processes of these astrocytes also press upon these capillaries, and they secrete certain chemicals which will prevent any substance from entering into the CNS. So that's the composition of the blood-brain barrier. So there are very few water-soluble substances like glucose which can cross the blood-brain barrier, that too by active transport. Whereas substances like creatinine, urea, most of the ions, they cannot cross the blood-brain barrier very easily. Even the proteins or certain antibiotics, they cannot pass into the brain tissues very easily unless and until any substance is highly lipid soluble in nature, such as oxygen or carbon dioxide, alcohol, or certain anesthetics which act in the CNS. They can cross the blood-brain barrier very easily because they are highly lipoidal in nature. Even any damage which is caused to the meninges or the blood-brain barrier, like say trauma or certain toxins or inflammation, it may increase the permeability of the blood-brain barrier, so that any substance which is present in your blood circulation can get easy access to the CNS. Okay, so this is to do with the brief introduction to the brain, the protective layers, and the blood flow and the blood-brain barrier. Then coming to the next part, that is the cerebrospinal fluid or CSF as it is called as. So that's a clear colorless liquid which is mainly composed of water, which protects the brain and the spinal cord from any kind of chemical or physical injuries. So that's the main function of cerebrospinal fluid. Remember we had discussed about the CSF, which is present within the subarachnoid space when we were discussing about the protective layers of the spinal cord. Even the spinal canal also is filled with the CSF. So this particular fluid, it also contains small amount of oxygen, glucose, and certain other chemicals which are required by the nervous tissue of the CNS. And the CSF, it is continuously circulating through the cavities of the brain. We'll come to the cavities of the brain and the spinal cord. Also around the brain and the spinal cord in the subarachnoid space, that's between the arachnoid matter and the pia mater, the middle and the innermost layer, to give the protection to the CNS because it's quite delicate. And the total volume of CSF, it is 80 to 150 ml in the adults. And apart from water, it comprises of glucose, proteins, lactic acid, urea, certain cations like sodium ions, potassium ions, calcium ions, magnesium ions, certain anions like chloride or bicarbonate. Even it may contain the WBC sometimes. So that's the composition of the cerebrospinal fluid. Now let us see where exactly it is formed and how exactly it flows within the CNS and how it has that protective function. So there are 4 CSF filled cavities present within the brain, ones which are shown in blue in color. Remember the cavities within the secondary vesicles, they develop into ventricles. We had discussed about the lateral ventricle, third ventricle, fourth ventricle. So these are the ones. There are certain CSF filled cavities within the brain and these are called as ventricles. Ventricles means little cavities. So there are 4 in number. Now the lateral ventricles and lateral ventricle. Lateral means sideways, something which is present at the side. Correct? So there is one lateral ventricle in each hemisphere of the cerebrum. That's the cerebrum. and it is divided into two hemispheres. So in each hemisphere, in each half of the cerebrum, within each half of this cerebrum lies one lateral ventricle. So how many lateral ventricles are present? There are two lateral ventricles which are present. As you can see over here, this is the right ventricle and that's the left lateral ventricle. Okay, so these are the two ventricles, two lateral ventricles. Anteriorly, these two ventricles are separated by a thin membrane called as septum pellucidum. It's not visible over here, but we'll talk about it a little later. In the later pictures, it will be visible. Then the third ventricle, this is the one. Now, was there any first and second ventricle? Now, why you are calling this as a third ventricle then? That's because there are two lateral ventricles, right? That's why this one is named as a third ventricle. So this is a narrow slit-like cavity along the midline, just superior to the hypothalamus and in between the right and the left thalamus. Small cavity is present. That's called as the third ventricle. Apart from this, there is one more ventricle called as a fourth ventricle, which lies in between the brainstem and the cerebellum. That's the cerebellum, that's the brainstem, right? Pons, medulla oblongata. So in between these two structures lies the fourth ventricle. Now coming to the functions of the CSF. So before going into the formation and the flow, let's talk about the functions of the CSF. There are three main functions which are carried out by this CSF. First one is the mechanical protection, second one is the homeostatic function, and the third one is the circulation. So mechanical protection. So it's a shock absorbing liquid, right, which forms a protective layer around the brain and the spinal cord in the subarachnoid space. So imagine if this liquid was absent. What would have happened? The brain and the spinal cord, it would have got damaged, right? As you move about, it would hit against the bony walls of the cranial cavity and the vertebral canal. So it would have got damaged. So for that matter, it is a fluid which buoys the brain. That is, the brain floats in the cranial cavity, as you can see. So it forms a cushioning layer surrounding the brain as well as the spinal cord to give the mechanical protection. Second function is the homeostatic function. That is the pH of the CSF. It affects the pulmonary ventilation and the cerebral blood flow. So it will help in maintaining the proper supply of oxygen or proper supply of the blood, which is required to be supplied to the brain tissues. So also it serves as a transport system for some polypeptide hormones which may be secreted by the hypothalamic neurons to be acting in certain areas of the brain. Third function is circulation. The CSF also acts as a medium for exchange of some nutrients or waste products between the blood and the nervous tissue. So these are the three main functions which are carried out by the CSF. Now coming to the formation of the CSF in the ventricles. So the CSF, it is formed in these ventricles, the lateral ventricles. There are two lateral ventricles. There is a third ventricle and there is a fourth ventricle. So within these ventricles, the formation of the CSF takes place. So CSF, from where it will be formed? It will be formed from the blood. There are structures called as choroid plexuses, means membrane-like plexuses. So that's the actual picture of the brain. As you can see over here, I'll zoom it for you to make it more clear. That's the choroid plexus. These are the lateral ventricles, this one and this one, and it is separated by a translucent membrane known as septum pellucidum. Remember this one? So within these two lateral ventricles lie these choroid plexus. Now let us see what exactly this choroid plexus is. That's the one. So this will be the blood capillary of this choroid plexus. So this blood will be filtered to form the CSF. Now what will get filtered? What is the composition of the CSF? It's mainly comprising of water with few dissolved substances. Because any substance can't cross this particular layer which is formed by the ependymal cell. Remember the ependymal cells? It's a type of neuroglia which is lining the ventricles. It's a type of neuroglia, right? Fourth type of neuroglia which we had discussed in the CNS. That's the blood capillary. These are the endothelial cells. Now this blood capillary is lined by these ependymal cells, and these ependymal cells, they have tight junctions. So because of these tight junctions, any substance cannot cross in between these ependymal cells. So whatever gets filtered out of the blood capillaries, it must first enter this ependymal cells, and then this ependymal cell will secrete it out into the ventricles in the form of CSF. So that's the process of formation of the CSF. In different ventricles, these choroid plexuses are present, and the filtration of the blood takes place from the blood capillaries through the ependymal cells, and it will result in formation of CSF. Now there may be exchange of substances. So certain substances may also cross ependymal cell to enter into the blood capillaries also. Okay, so it's a bidirectional flow. The production of the CSF will also take place, and transport of certain metabolites from the nervous tissue into the blood may also take place. Okay, so because of these tight junctions, any substance cannot pass in between these ependymal cells. So this particular structural arrangement over here, it forms a blood cerebrospinal fluid barrier, blood CSF barrier. Just like blood brain barrier, there is a blood CSF barrier. Because what did I tell you about this? Any substance cannot easily cross this particular layer of ependymal cell due to presence of the tight junctions. So your brain is again protected against the entry of any harmful substance which may be present in your blood. So that cannot cross very easily, this particular layer. So that forms a blood cerebrospinal fluid barrier. So what's the difference between the blood-brain barrier and the blood cerebrospinal fluid barrier? In case of blood-brain barrier, it is the endothelium of the blood vessels which are held together by tight junctions, and additionally these are covered by the processes of the astrocytes. Whereas in case of blood cerebrospinal fluid barrier, it is a tight junction in between these ependymal cells which is actually acting as a barrier, which prevents the movement of the substance. Then coming to the circulation of the CSF. So we have seen that the formation, it takes place at the choroid plexuses, right? So these are the different ventricles of the brain. That's the lateral ventricle. So only one can be seen over here. Another one will be present on the opposite side. This one is the third ventricle, and this space in between the brainstem and the cerebellum, that's the fourth ventricle. Now the CSF which is formed over here, can you see that one? These are the choroid plexus of the lateral ventricles. So as you can see that the blood capillaries which are present over here, from here filtration will take place, CSF will be formed. The arrow will tell you in what direction it is moving. So it has now got filtered and formation of the CSF has taken place in the lateral ventricle. Now from lateral ventricle, this CSF will flow towards the third ventricle through two openings on either sides. That is the interventricular foramen. So from this lateral ventricle, it is moving towards the third ventricle. Now in the third ventricle again there are choroid plexuses. So these are the choroid plexus of the third ventricle. So again here the formation of CSF is taking place. So some more volume of CSF is added over here. Already the CSF from the lateral ventricles is entering into the third ventricle. Additionally, some more CSF is being formed. From here the CSF will flow into the fourth ventricle. That's the fourth ventricle, right? So it will flow into the fourth ventricle through this opening called as aqueduct of the midbrain, or cerebral aqueduct as it is called as. So here again the choroid plexus of the fourth ventricle again add to the volume of the CSF. So some more CSF will be formed over here. And finally from here it will pass into the subarachnoid space via three openings: a single median aperture and a paired lateral apertures. That's a median aperture, and that's the lateral aperture. So this is the one which is present on the right hand side, and one more will be present on the left hand side. So these three openings, that is a single median aperture and the two lateral apertures, will allow the CSF to flow into the subarachnoid space. That's the subarachnoid space. Okay. Apart from this, it will also be flowing into the central canal. Remember the central canal which is present within the gray matter of the spinal cord. So it is flowing through the central canal as well as the subarachnoid space surrounding the brain as well as the spinal cord. So this is how the formation and the flow of the CSF will take place. So as it flows around, it will protect the brain and the spinal cord. So this is one more picture which shows the frontal plane. So these two are the lateral ventricles. That's the choroid plexus of the lateral ventricles. So here the CSF formation will take place. It will move to the third ventricle through the lateral foramina. Here again few more ml of the CSF will be formed, and through the aqueduct of the midbrain or the cerebral aqueduct, it will flow into the fourth ventricle. Here again some more CSF will be formed, and through the median aperture and the lateral aperture, it will flow into the subarachnoid space and the spinal canal, central canal. Now whatever CSF it is formed, it gets reabsorbed ultimately through these structures called as arachnoid villus. These are the ones. So ultimately whatever CSF is flowing through, it will be reabsorbed by these arachnoid villi, which are finger-like extensions of the arachnoid, which projects into the dural venous sinuses. So a cluster of arachnoid villi, these are known as arachnoid granulation. So whatever CSF is being formed, it is also getting reabsorbed. So it is returned back to the blood. Just like your lymph, remember your lymphatic system? It is formed by filtration of the blood, right? And ultimately it will return back to the blood. Similarly, CSF is also filtered from the blood and returned back to the blood. So the rate of reabsorption of the CSF is the same as that of formation of the CSF. It's about 20 ml per hour, that is 480 ml per day. Because the rate of formation and the rate of reabsorption are the same, the pressure of the CSF, it is normally constant. And for the same reason, the volume of the CSF also remains constant. Because the formation and the reabsorption, both are taking place at the same rate. So that's the flow of the CSF, the formation and the flow of the CSF which is taking place. So from the heart, the arterial blood which move towards the brain, it is getting filtered, right? In the lateral ventricle choroid plexus, it will get filtered. So CSF will be entering into the lateral ventricles. In the third ventricle choroid plexus, again filtration will take place, some more amount of CSF will be added. And in the fourth ventricle choroid plexus also formation of CSF will take place and it will be added to the fourth ventricle. Whatever CSF is present in the lateral ventricles, it will enter into the third ventricle through the interventricular foramina on either sides. From third ventricle, it will move into the fourth ventricle through the aqueduct of the midbrain or the cerebral aqueduct. And through the lateral and the medial apertures, it will move into the subarachnoid space. From here, this may be reabsorbed into arachnoid villi of the dural venous sinuses, and this venous blood will be returned back to the heart. So that's how the formation and the flow of CSF will take place. And in the meantime, it carries out all the three functions: mechanical protection, homeostasis, as well as the transportation of certain substances. So this is to do with the introduction to different parts of the brain, protective layers of the brain, the blood supply to the brain, and the formation and the flow of the cerebrospinal fluid. So in the upcoming videos, we'll be discussing about all the parts of the brain in detail. That is the brain stem, the cerebellum, the diencephalon, and the cerebrum. Thank you for watching.